we're going to get into chapter 4, workforce jobs and job analysis. So a lot of this is basically kind of laying the foundation for the future chapters. That is, if we're going to hire someone, we have to figure out what job we're actually hiring them into, what knowledge, skills, and abilities, educational requirements, experience, whatever. If we're going to pay someone, we have to figure out how much that job is actually worth by pricing that job somewhere. We do that based on the competencies required for the job. If we are going to worry about turnover or retention or performance management, we have to look at the job design. What is it that they actually do? I mean, we can design jobs that make people get divorced, do drugs, commit suicide, and we can design jobs that cause people to flourish and love their life. So what somebody does for 40, 50, 60 hours a week has a major effect on them. So that's what we looked at in terms of job design. And of course, job analysis, every component of the job, how we pay it, how we manage it, stuff like that. So let's get into a few basic principles. Number one, here's the concept: people need stimulating work. So forever, what would happen is if you wanted to be a farmer in an agrarian society, you would somehow get a field and you would plow it and harvest it, and you would sell it, and you would save some, and you would preserve it, and you did the whole aspect of the farming job. Or if you were a tailor or a blacksmith or whatever it was, you did the whole part of the job. It wasn't kind of outsourced piece at a time. If you want to build a house, you're doing all of the house, for instance. So we have this guy, Frederick Taylor, comes along in terms of scientific management, and he says, hey, look, some people are better at different things. And if you break work down to its smallest piece, you can actually get a lot of efficiency out of it. So we have time and motion studies, story of the Nazi concentration camps, where people, the Nazi soldiers had the POWs or whoever was in the concentration camp basically dig a big hole and move a bunch of rocks to one side of the camp. And then when they were done, it's just to keep them busy, right? So they're not escaping or getting into trouble or whatever. They would take all those rocks and dirt and then move them back to the other side of the camp. And they did that about 3 or 4 times before people started running into electric fences and running into the shooting zone and killing themselves because it was making them go crazy. And so not a great place to get research data, but compelling in that if people don't have stimulating work, they begin to lose their freaking minds. The job characteristics model, which we'll look at today, came out late 60s, early 70s. And said, no, Ashley, there are 5 characteristics to jobs at least, and the more complex you make the job, the better people generally do, and certainly the better they enjoy it. And then the big one on this was a guy named Tim Judge. He did a meta-analysis, basically a really big study over a long period of time, and found the #1 predictor of job satisfaction, which is pretty simple, like, do you like your job? The #1 predictor was mental stimulation. So in other words, if you have to think on your job, you have to use your brain, then you typically like your job. And if your job is mundane and dumb and actually making you dumber, then you usually hate your job. So with that kind of as a foundation, let's hit a few concepts. Workforce profile. So the labor participation rate, this is something that we look at nationally in the United States, and that is what percentage of the population is engaged in work or ready for work or would like to go to work. There's other numbers, in their unemployment, stuff like that. But really from an HR perspective, we're asking the question, how many people would like to have a job or are working, and what do they like in education and age and gender and stuff like that. So from an education perspective, you can see about 87% in 2010. You can see we got a decade split here on the data. 87% have at least a high school diploma, and about 30% or so, generally considered about a third of people, have an undergraduate degree. So if you are staffing for a job, you can look out there and say, how many people do we need with undergraduate degrees? Simple supply and demand. You can see it's going to probably cost you a little bit more money than just a high school education. This has also forced a lot of employers, I think in a good way, to evaluate, okay, we used to say you have to have a bachelor's degree for this job, but do you really? Is it true that you can't be a manager unless you have a bachelor's degree? Well, probably not. Is it true that you can't be a CPA, an accountant, unless you have a bachelor's degree? Probably so. So they've reevaluated that a little bit. In terms of work and jobs, a few definitions that I'll use throughout here that we need to know. Number 1, work. Work is just effort. That's all it is. So when I say somebody is going to work, applying effort towards some kind of result. And a job is a grouping of TDRs, of tasks, duties, responsibilities. And the job that's basically all of their work. The duty is kind of the highest level, and then the task, said that wrong. The responsibility is the highest level. I have a responsibility to teach. There are several duties within that and several small tasks within each one of those duties. So you can think of it kind of like an outline. Workflow analysis. Got another slide here. This is kind of what we look at in terms of a workflow analysis. Basically, it's an open systems concept, right? There's input, process, and output. That is, what's going in to the organization or to the work itself. It's usually people, information. There's probably policies and processes. There's equipment. There's technology. A bunch of stuff goes into what somebody uses for work. And then the process, hopefully it's a value-added process. That's what the actual work is, and the outcome is, the output is kind of what you have out of it. So if you think about it in terms of, let's just do this, in terms of teaching. Okay, so we have computers, we have technology, we have a microphone, we have a webcam, we have training, we have human minds, we have personality characteristics, and all those things by themselves maybe don't create a lot of value in terms of learning HR. But when we crunch them into this process of getting information online or building evaluation tools or quizzes or papers or grading or whatever, when we do that, we say maybe we're taking those separate things and we're creating value through a particular process, and the outcome, in theory, is somebody who understands a little bit more how to manage people in the HR process. So simple workflow analysis. Related to that is job design and redesign. This is, you usually think about a job design when you're creating a new job. So let's say you've got 60, 70, people working at your company. You say, okay, I think we need a chief marketing officer. We need someone in charge of all the marketing for our products. Well, you're gonna have to do a lot of work to figure out what that is and how much you pay them and where you find them and stuff like that. But it begins by saying, what is that job? Like, what are the objectives of that job? How do we know if someone is actually doing well on that job or poorly on that job? You can't just say, boy, if we make money. There has to be some job-specific objectives, job-specific criteria. So job design is like initially creating what constitutes the job. Job redesign is something you do with an understanding that, hey, jobs change over time. We'll just stick with the same example. The job of a professor 100 years ago, who'd have 3 students, right, is a little bit different than 50 years ago and is massively different than today with technology and the rate of research progress. So we go, okay, wait a second, let's pause. Let's look at how that job was originally designed. This is how we used to have somebody sell cell phones in 2002. We need to redesign that job for 2022, whatever it is. So redesign is just that. You're taking a look at the assumptions and redesigning the job for efficiency. Okay, a little bit more definition here, and then we'll get into the job characteristics model. So types of employees, this is just helpful to know. There is a huge surge in the market right now of contingent workers. There's all kinds of legal reasons and some financial reasons why a firm would want to do that. We'll just go through it. Full-time employees are just what you think of. They're someone who is a direct, so you may have heard the term FTE, full-time equivalent, worker at that company. They're entitled to things like organizational benefits. They're entitled to protections under certain employment laws. There's a part-time employee, kind of the same thing, works less hours. An independent contractor means they are contracted with the organization. That's different than being a direct employee. So an independent contractor, for instance, is much easier to think of this like the person who's building your house. Okay, you go to a custom home builder, you say, build me this house, and it starts going, you go, I don't like how it's going. I'm breaking the contract. I'll pay whatever I have to pay. Like you're out and fire you. That's different than firing an employee. You have to have you don't have to have much less justification and precedent and history, stuff like that. That's an independent contractor. Temporary worker is similar, but there's a specific period of time. Basically, you're paying for someone's service. You're paying for someone's mind. Contingent workers can be kind of all of them. Contingent workers are usually thought of as being independent contractors or temporary workers, but it means that their employment status is contingent on something. They're not a direct full-time employee. When we When we design jobs, specifically when we hire, I'll bring this up again, we talk about selection. When we hire, like this is our baby, person job fit. So basically in a job, see am I in the camera here? Oh, yeah, I am, cool. In a job, you have tasks, duties, and responsibilities. And in a human mind and heart, you have knowledge, skills, and abilities or competencies. So what we look for is a match of those things. You like if I applied to be a drive-through worker at McDonald's, we'd say, you know what? Yeah, he might be qualified for that job, but I would be a really bad hire because I wouldn't be a good fit for that job. So it's not just does the person meet the minimum qualifications? It's do they fit? The way they're wired, what they know, their experience or skills, does it fit with, frankly, the requirements of the job? This is really important when we begin to talk about job design, which is the next slide, because what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes is how to design one aspect of that equation, right? There's the human aspect, knowledge, skills, and abilities. We try to find those through selection or even through training. And then there's the job aspect, which is tasks, duties, and requirements. So in sum, we're going to try to design a job. That's the baseline. That's why we do this chapter first. And then we go find the person that fits that job. Occasionally, rarely, it happens the other way around. I found this person, I want to hire them. I don't know what job I'm going to put them in yet. We have to create a job for them. Just because the way they are, I think they're awesome. I want them on my team. You can do that with limited success. So usually we begin by designing the job. And around 1969, 1971, these guys came up with the job characteristics model, Hackman and Oldham. You don't have to worry about those researchers. A couple of smart people, and they said, hey, look, this model is really important. So I'm going to explain the model here and then kind of dissect it in a couple slides, and then we'll revisit it. So hopefully bring it all together and synthesize it. So here is the voted the #2 most useful theory in management over 100 years. So this is still referred to often. It's taught in every textbook, and there's a reason for it. This one actually has both internal validity and external validity. It goes like this. Every job has it falls somewhere on a continuum with these 5 characteristics: skill, variety, task, identity, significance, autonomy, and feedback. So everything you see there on the left. Every job has those. It's not like if I have the most boring, mundane job in the world, there is skill variety. It's just very low. And if I am a neurosurgeon, where I have to meet with families and then evaluate charts and actually perform surgery and do follow-up and post-op, I have to do all that. There's skill variety. It's just very high. So in that way, every job falls somewhere on a continuum with these 5 characteristics. The theory moves on. It says, the way the job is designed here on those 5 things actually predicts how people feel about their job. So if I have a job with very low skill variety, low task identity, and low task significance, meaning I don't have to use my brain in this job, I do a really small piece of the work and it doesn't affect anyone and nobody gives a crap about this job, then probably you're not going to feel like what you do is very meaningful. So that's the psychological state, or in this case called the mediator, those circles in the middle. So each of the job characteristics on the left lead to each of those psychological states in the middle. Now, if those psychological states are high, meaning my job is meaningful, I feel responsible for my job, and I have feedback on my job, so a knowledge of results so I can change my performance, then a few things are going to happen. Number 1, I'll be more motivated. Number 2, I'll be more satisfied. Number 3, I'll actually be better at my job. So, big picture, those things on the left affect those things in the middle, affect the ultimate outcomes of satisfaction and performance. So let's unpack them. Skill variety. If you have a job that has high skill variety, the work would require several activities for successful completion. It's not Henry Ford assembly line. I put that spoke on that wheel, and that's what I do for 15 hours a day, for 6 days a week. Now, that would be very low task identity. High task identity, I have to use I think of like a welder. It might be kind of a weird example, but a welder has to consider the chemical processes, the type of metal they're working with, the temperature, the type of weld they're bringing to it. Then they have to actually engage their body to do the welding. Then they have to switch over to the end, the custom work on making it all pretty. So it requires a lot of different skills, meaning the work is probably more meaningful. Task identity. Do you get to do the whole thing? Were you like one of the first couple of engineers who built the vehicle? It was two guys that built the first car. They did everything. Now, of course, we have assembly lines. But when you get to do the whole thing, you feel like it's much more meaningful. So if I'm going to build a house from scratch, there's dirt there, and there's a functioning house there when it's done, it's very meaningful to me, right? If I'm just a person that comes in and installs the insulation in 30 houses, you know, whatever, that quarter, it's not so meaningful to me so much because I didn't get to do the whole thing, right? Last one is task significance. Does it affect people? Does anybody actually know? Is anybody aware that it's even happening? To the extent that goes up, that's pretty cool. Task significance to me, to some extent, there's also like this public component. It's like, mom, dad, you know, this is my fiance, the garbage man, or mom, dad, this is my fiance, the CEO of a multinational, you know, not-for-profit that digs wells for people. Okay, one of those is really cool, and one of those is like, all right. So I call it the fiance test on task significance. Does it impact people, and do people think it's cool? So with these right here, if skill variety is high, I have to use a lot of skills to do the job. I get to do the whole job, and the job actually matters. So think about your job right now that you have, if you have a job. Do you have to use a lot of different skills? Does anybody care what you do? Like, is it cool? Does it have an impact on people? And do you get to do one little slice of the pie, or do you get to do kind of the whole thing? If those are high, chances are you're like, yeah, this is a meaningful job. It actually matters. The next two, autonomy. Back in the 1980s, they stopped using the word autonomy. They began to use the word empowerment. Right? So there's a whole literature on empowerment, but it's very similar. Do you have self-determination? Do you get to decide how things get done and then implement that? So we might say that someone working in an assembly line or in fast food probably doesn't have a lot of autonomy. They can't look at a Big Mac and go, you know what? Man, I'm putting 5 pickles on this one. I'm going to put in 3 patties. Hey, let's go with a sourdough bun this time. We're just going to switch it up a bit. No, we're not going to have people do that who are making Big Macs. If someone is an architect, they may go, hey, or an artist, I guess would be the perfect example. You go, you can create this sculpture or this painting or this whatever it is, however you want. You get to decide, and you are responsible for the results. So when it's on you, you get to decide. You tend to, let me jump back here. You tend to feel responsible for it. Why? Because there's nobody else to blame. There's nobody else to take credit, and there's nobody else to say, well, it wasn't my fault, it was their fault, because you were the one that got to decide it. Of all of them, autonomy, in my view, is probably the most powerful. The more autonomy or empowerment you can give to employees, they feel responsible for their work. They're probably going to love their work a lot more. Now, here's the problem. Take a look at the word empower. It means you're giving, as a manager, you're actually giving your power away. You're giving your decision-making authority away. So you can't go out and empowering every bonehead on your shop floor, right? Like, you can only do this in certain situations. You can see the complexity. If I empower some people and not others, there may be a sense of injustice. But where you can, autonomy is a beautiful, very impactful thing on employees. The last one is feedback. Do you know quickly and accurately how well you did on your job? So when I write a paper to publish and I submit it to an editor and I hear back in 6 months whether they accepted it or want me to create a revision, that's like feedback. That tells me how good was that paper. My peers are going to go decide, you know, blind peer review, and they're going to tell me, they're going to affirm, yes, Avey, you did a good job. This is a good paper. So I have feedback, which means the next paper that I'm writing, I'm going to do that same thing again. Or if they say, no, James, there was grammar mistakes all over the paper, and you used the wrong theory for your hypotheses. Well, as soon as I have that feedback, that means I can correct my performance on the next behavior. Another example is a waiter at a restaurant. I used to work at Red Robin when I was in college. And you'd find out pretty quick what jokes people liked You'd find out pretty quick how to interact with families, right? The cheap crowd that wanted the free fries and the free refills, if you stay on it quick, right? And the folks who came in and they just wanted to drink hard alcohol, you had a pretty good idea how that was going to go. And so how would I know if I was doing a good job? Tips. In 25, 35 minutes, I have a real empirical number right there. This is how well you did with that table. If it went well, I would employ the same strategy next time. If it didn't go well, I would stop funny jokes about cooks in the kitchen and leave it alone. So you can basically modify your performance with the feedback you get on your job. Some jobs you get lots of feedback, right? And in this job, in terms of teaching, people usually think the feedback is like teacher evaluations at the end. It's not for me. Feedback for me is in 3 years when someone calls and says, hey, this happened, I remembered this, and I did the right thing. Or, Avey, I remember you talking about something on this topic, salary negotiations, I just got this job offer, what do I do? To me, that's feedback. It's like, okay, that made a dent. When I told that story, people actually remembered it. So, in sum, where are we here? Each of those 5 things contribute to each of those 3 psychological states. We want them all higher as much as we can. There are certain jobs you can't give autonomy, right? There's certain jobs that they're just low feedback by nature, right? If you're firing off a satellite to Pluto and those pictures don't come back for a year, you're not going to know if you did the calculus right for about a year. There's nothing you can do about it. But on our end, on a manager end, as much as we can design jobs to enhance these 5 things, it'll go better for us, go better for our employees. Now, here's the question. What do we do about it? So far, I've used this as a descriptive model, meaning it describes how job design impacts performance and attitudes, right? So let's switch it from a descriptive model, describing it, to a prescriptive model. Let's look at what is the prescription. If this theory is useful, there should be a prescription. In other words, it should tell managers what to actually do. So there's basically 3 main prescriptions from this particular theory. Again, the concept that we're looking at is how do we design a job or change a job, redesign a job, to increase these 5 things so we get the benefit of that as managers, also as employees, and as the organization as a whole. So 3 ways we do that are job enlargement, job enrichment, and job rotation. I got a lot of stories on this, but it'll take way too long. But something as simple as job rotation, that's shifting someone around from position to position. There's certain areas you can do that. You can't shift me to go be an accounting professor. It's not going to work. It would be a disaster, right? But there's certain areas you can. I did some work in a meat processing factory, which is kind of a crazy place. But something as simple as job rotation made a big deal. So where you would do this is when there's a very defined statement of work. Think assembly line, or in our case, like meat processing. Think fast food. The fry girl can go be the burger girl, can go be the cashier girl, can go be, I mean, whatever. You get the idea. That they're defined statements of work, and we can rotate people. You don't, if you work at McDonald's, you're not the fry guy for 52 weeks a year. We rotate people around, and what that does is enhances skill variety. Means they have to learn different things, use their brain, do different things. Enhances maybe a little bit of task identity, meaning I get to see at least a lot more of the whole job. And maybe when the fry guy finally gets to work the drive-through window, maybe his task significance, they go, man, it was pretty cool, like giving people their meal. If that's cool, I guess, giving people fries from McDonald's. But that would be a little bit of task significance. You're probably not going to affect autonomy or feedback with job rotation alone. So that's the simple one. It does matter. I've seen it change both turnover and performance. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, let me switch up here to job enlargement. Job enlargement is your job used to be doing the fries. Now your job simultaneously, same time, is doing fries, burgers, and drive-through. So job enlargement is a natural consequence of lower staffing. So if your company's gone through RIFs, a reduction of force, layoffs, you're going to have people who just by nature of there's not as many people there, they're going to have to do more of a component of the job. You can already imagine that's going to impact those top 3 areas specifically. Variety, identity, and significance, and also probably a little bit of autonomy and maybe a little bit of feedback. So job enlargement for us is kind of the middle one. It happens naturally, like I said, when there's less staffing, but we can also design jobs to be more, to hit more of those areas. Okay, the last one, the reason I call it the last one is it is really the most difficult to do. Job enrichment. So let me give you like an example on steroids. So there's a burger flipper at McDonald's, and we want to enrich that job. So I say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Burger Flipper, you're going to evaluate all the meat when it comes in. You're going to check inventory, and you're going to look at sales over the past 2 years and use prediction models to see how many burgers we need on a Friday versus a Sunday afternoon versus a Tuesday. You're going to manage that inventory on a LIFO or a FIFO method. You're going to go to burger plants. Sounds nicer than slaughterhouses, right? But you're going to go to the area where we harvest. You're going to examine the cows, right? And you're going to see have they been given steroids? Are they naturally fed? Are they grass fed? And you can consider different menu options for burgers. Yeah, okay, this is not really going to happen, right? But that's an example of enriching the job. It means, okay, this area that you're working on, we're going to give you decision-making authority in this job. You do this carefully, you do this on an individual basis, and you use job criteria to figure out who actually gets that job. Because it is a lot of responsibility, you're gonna pay more, but what you have really maximized is autonomy. You have basically, this is idea of psychological ownership. You've given ownership over a certain area. People are going to feel responsible for it, and this is the big one. And people are generally going to step up, assuming you've selected well, and do better and love their job. So in sum, that's the job characteristics model. It's a pretty simple concept, and everybody knows it, and it has very practical implementation strategies for managers, especially dealing with outdated jobs or brand new jobs. That's where this really comes in handy. All right.